It is Joe. I heard from my mum that you are visiting the farm again. It's hard to believe that she isn't there to show you around herself, which is where I come in. I see my mum did tell you to switch on your live location. Now, I assume you're either in or very close to the large gathering space. It is a relatively open space, outdoors, deliberately exposed, but arranged according to a memory of an enclosure. The layout was inspired by the lowest floor of the Johannesburg Central Methodist Church. Inspired, not repeated. We do not pretend to inherit the walls, only their moral geometry. My mother finds meaning in this church. She speaks of its history often, how it sheltered activists during apartheid, how it later hosted the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She speaks of this as though the arch was self-evident, as though shelter naturally became testimony, and testimony naturally became healing. I do not interrupt her. I have learned that interruptions are mistaken for cruelty. I distrust stories that arrive complete. This distrust is not intellectual. I read between the lines because I was born into the space between statements. Things in my family were never explained to me, only arranged. My mother is married to a man. She does not live with him. Even though he lives on the farm, she is gay. These facts are presented without connective tissue, like objects placed on a table and left to accuse one another. I learned early that explanations were not forthcoming, and that questions were treated as violations of atmosphere. One matures morally under such conditions without instruction. One is handed consequences without causes. I knew what was wrong long before I knew why. This produces a particular kind of vigilance. My grandfather attempts to help me by telling stories. He speaks often of Mary, the mother of Jesus. He believes, almost tenderly, that she lied, that the lie preserved her life, that in a world governed by absolutes like purity or death, the lie became a narrow passage through which mercy slipped in. He says dignity sometimes depends on what is not said. I understand him. That understanding has not made me kinder, because when nothing is said, one eventually suspects oneself. Silence accumulates blame. If no one speaks, then perhaps you are the problem. This thought does not announce itself loudly. It works quietly in the background. You should know that I dislike confession. I dislike it not because I fear truth, but because confession arrives too late and demands applause. Public truth-telling rituals, apologies, and symbolic gestures strike me as retrospective performances. They presume that damage waits patiently to be acknowledged. I've seen enough to know that damage does not wait. This is why exhibiting work unsettles me. My mother wanted you to see it. She believes exhibitions clarify things. I believe they expose without resolving. The works are placed throughout this open space. They are not explanations. They are records of pressure, of withholding. Someone learning early, very early, that survival sometimes depends not on speaking, but on remaining unreadable. I will send you photos of the areas you should go to next. Move through them at your own pace. Pause where the layout forces you to hesitate. That hesitation is intentional. I hope you find something of value here, though value, like truth, rarely arrives where it announces itself. Good. I can see that you have reached the first part of the exhibition. What you're looking at are old timber mine props. You may already be anticipating a story about labor and resistance. You may be waiting for me to say that my father, Petrus, objected to their installation, that the work was heavy, that the rain will rot them, that this rot is symbolic, that I am pleased by it. I will not give you that satisfaction. These props did not arrive here without effort. Petrus did not welcome the task. That is all I am prepared to say. Most of the timber was repurposed as support beams in his house and in my mother's house. Structures that required reinforcement without debate or ceremony. The ones you see here were left outside. They are not holding anything up. They are not preventing collapse. They exist in excess of necessity. This is where the discomfort begins. For the men who worked underground, timber was not a medium of expression. It was a condition of survival. It held the earth back long enough for a shift to end. There was no space there for the luxury of reflection. At the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, where need is measured in breath and hours, you do not get to express yourself. The works you're looking at belongs to a series called Shade and Cover. They were produced using an AI model called Cycle Generative Adversarial Network, or CycleGAN. Two agents are set against one another and instructed to proceed regardless. One generates, the other discriminates. Each advances only insofar as it limits the other. There is no shared value here, only mutual utility. I do not read this as cooperation in any moral sense. What emerges can be remarkably effective, even impressive, without ever becoming trustworthy. That distinction matters to me. I was not raised to confuse function with virtue. Accordingly, the model was trained on photographs of trees once felled and repurposed as mining props in Johannesburg. It learned their surfaces, their colors, their forms. From this, it developed a visual grammar shaped by extraction and support. But what is required to hold weight underground? That grammar was then applied to a set of WeChat messages, circulating within a system built not on minerals, but on scale. That translation does not flatten the difference. It exposes it. The same logic of dependence moves through both. One material, one immaterial. The connection is efficient, not reassuring. The resulting images, for the most part, do not convincingly resemble trees. They resemble something else entirely. They look like levels, perhaps platforms. Spaces that anticipate movement, jumping, falling. Landscapes that suggest use without offering shelter. Trees, but only in quotation marks. If you wish to see the original WeChat message that informed the current composition, you can switch on the camera. Through augmented reality, it will appear. I leave it to you to decide whether this revelation clarifies anything. Take your time here. When you're ready, you can make your way to the next point. You're at the stage now. I do not have much to say about it. It mattered to my grandfather. He used to stand there and speak for long periods of time, not performances, lectures. He did not raise his voice. He assumed attention. People listened because it seemed easier than interrupting him. There was one occasion when my mother wanted him to speak again. She asked him to go up and say something. I believe it was meant to be about love. The exact subject escapes me. What I remember is that he refused, not politely, not thoughtfully. He became angry, defensive, in a way that suggested he felt accused, rather than invited. His voice rose. His jaw worked against itself at some point. His denture slipped loose. That ended the matter. No one suggested he continue. The stage remained empty. That was the last time the matter was raised.
Joune was joune. Wanneer was wanneer. Sommige was sommige. Alles was alles. Hij was hij. Wat was wat. Niemand was niemand. Julle was julle. Binne was binne. Niks was niks. Hoe was hoe. Hier was hier. Nergens was nergens. Ons was ons. Syne was syne. Waar was waar.
There was a moment on the farm that I had forgotten about until this monologue reminded me of it. It is attached to one of my grandfather's lectures. My mother was sitting near the stage on one of the tires we used as seating. I don't know if they are still there. My grandfather was lecturing us on God, specifically about the difficulty the church has in reconciling God of the Old Testament with God of the New Testament. He spoke carefully. He described the Old Testament God as a figure attached to violence, to floods, plagues, the killing of firstborns, to cities erased, a God surrounded by verbs that act upon bodies. He contrasted this with the New Testament God, whom we prefer to imagine as benevolent, forgiving, restrained, a God who we recognize more easily now. He asked how an omnipotent being could have changed so completely. I remember thinking that God had not changed at all, that God merely reflected the world that addressed him. In a world governed by domination, conquest, and survival, God was understood as a weapon. Truth itself was spoken in the language of force. That was the vocabulary available. Even now, I find myself trying to think in a vocabulary that was never fully spoken, though I'm certain it exists. In our rural, insulated debates, nothing ever resolved itself. My mother, committed to her ideals, was not available to me in that way. She occupied the space, but not the exchange. My father lived on the same land, yet our lives rarely met. Sharing ground did not translate into belonging. I did not feel fully placed there. Still, my mother continues her solitary, almost devotional movement towards Salem, And that persistence, however narrow, however unshared, remains. I have to return to work now. If you're ever in Johannesburg, let me know. It might be good to speak in person. Until next time.